Welcome to Washington State Legends of Soccer and our series Conversations with a Legend. I'm Frank MacDonald and our producer is Leanne Johnson. Today, our guest is Lamar Neagle, one of our state's most accomplished players in MLS, including more than 6 seasons with the Sounders and more recently the Tacoma Stars. Lamar grew up in Federal Way. He's now living in Bonnie Lake and working with the Tacoma office of Morgan Stanley. Welcome, Lamar.
Thank you, Frank. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Very good to see you. Very, very good to see you. Let's just get into this. We'll go chronologically to begin with. But for a kid from Federal Way, your trip to CenturyLink Field, now Lumen Field, it takes a circuitous route, and that's a lot of the reason we wanted to speak to you, because it's probably the route that a lot of people are curious how they can realize their dream. So tell us about growing up, Lamar Neagle. Tell us about your family, your neighborhood, and what pulled you towards soccer.
Yeah, so my family, my mom, my Irish side, my dad, Black, he's from Georgia. Not a lot of soccer played there, but my mom's side has a little bit of history with soccer. Not too much that I was connected with growing up. The area that I was in actually had more to do with me playing soccer than family. But John Duggan, probably another Washington legend, is actually my grandma's brother. So we have connection there, and in the North Point area where I ended up playing. But I started out in Federal Way, as you said. I grew up like within a mile of Wild Waves. So in the summers, I used to walk there. That's kind of where I grew up. And at the elementary that I went to, absolutely everybody in my grade played soccer. And that's the only reason that I started playing was my peers were playing. And eventually around 3rd grade, 4th grade, they started playing competitively and kind of asked if I wanted to join the team. And that's kind of where my start ended up being.
Well, John Duggan, wow, that is a giant name in I guess from Federal Way south through Tacoma. I mean, big name.
Absolutely.
Other Sounders were coached by him at some point and another, I would imagine. Any stories that were ever repeated down the family line from him?
Not really. So we grew up in almost different kind of realms, and it wasn't even until after I was kind of at North Point that it was like, oh yeah, like, we have a family member, John Duggan, like who kind of started this club and who like kind of put it on the map, I think with the Royals back in the day. And so there wasn't too much of a connection there. Afterwards, obviously, it's fun to kind of align those. But no, growing up, it was through my peers really that got me my start in soccer and really kind of led the way through all of my kind of adolescent playing.
Okay. You played high school. Not a lot of, sometimes that's hit and miss these days with club and high school. So premier clubs, tell us about playing. Were you community, obviously, with the high school, but premier clubs and just what brought you then up through your teenage years?
Yeah, so I think it was a few different teams. The competitive teams, obviously, they costed money back then, just like they cost money now. So I started at Boys and Girls Club, playing for those kind of teams, rec teams, the first few years. I remember my mom was saying, if you really like it and you're doing well, then we'll talk about the competitive teams. And so I ended up doing really well at the Boys and Girls Clubs and ended up getting on the competitive team with all my friends at Federal Way. We ended up winning a state championship when we were in U11. I remember at Federal Way Stadium. I remember they played "We Are the Champions" afterwards. That was my first taste of like a kind of a cool championship where we all got pictures and medals and stuff like that. But after that, it was kind of off and on. I was cut from the team even after doing pretty well I was cut from that team where all my friends were at, and so I was kind of discouraged from playing. One of my best friends, his dad ended up starting a kind of a rec team that I ended up playing for just because they didn't want me to quit. So my best friend joined that team as well. The next year we both tried out. I ended up getting cut again from that team. And this is, gosh, I had to have been around 12, 13 years old, 12 maybe. And I remember I went and guest played for them. After I got cut, I went and guest played at a tournament, and I scored like all their goals. So then I was brought back on the team. And then the very next year I was cut again. And then that for me, I was like, all right, it's over. Like if I couldn't play with my best friends, then I was like, there's no point. I'll go play basketball, which I love as well. And I could play with my friends. But again, my best friend's dad, the same guy, he knew of a coach who was coaching at North Point. Since I had only tried out for one team, because that was the only team I wanted to play for, all the tryouts were over. Well, this coach agreed to let me come and just kick the ball around and see how I was. That coach ended up being Wade Weber at North Point Chivas. So I ended up jumping on with an amazing team and like another legend you could easily have on here. I don't know if we've had him on yet, but Wade Weber was the reason that I started really thinking about the game technically. Before that, it was just I was athletic. I had a knack for scoring goals and to get around people, but that really made me think of positioning and tactics. He put me on the left, so I started using my left foot during practice every single day. Was a big reason that I was versatile throughout my career, playing on the left or right. And then a couple years after Wade was a coach. So I think that team was actually the level below Federal Way, so the team that I got cut from. In the next 2 years, we had bumped up into that same league as Federal Way, and then we beat them every single time. And about 7 of my best friends from that Federal Way team came over to North Point and made the transition with me. So it was pretty awesome after a couple of years kind of having that success. And then Wade actually, he left, and then he left the team to Ralph Black, who is another guy that you could have on here. So it's amazing. When I look back, I didn't realize it at the time, but the level of coaching that I had was absolutely phenomenal. And I think a big reason why Federal Way soccer has been huge for, years and years is because of the level of coaching that we've had. So that was cool. And Ralph coached me all the way till we were done with the club. And then, as you said, high school was a pretty big thing back then, especially for the school that I ended up going to, which again, by chance happened to be TJ, which has, one of the best, had the best, I don't know if it still is, I'm sure it is, best record in history in state soccer for high school. And there it is, 13. We ended up winning the state championship, and my coach again happened to be Darren Sawatsky, another guy who played in the league and amazing coach. And I think I got to thank him and Ralph for kind of my mentality on the field, which was, I might not be the most skilled, honestly, but nobody's going to work harder than me.
If there's a prize for dropping names of coaches, Lamar, you've shot to the top. That's amazing. I did not know that. And you speak to the social aspect of soccer, and we discount that too much, or it gets overlooked a lot. That it was a father of a friend, and second chances and playing together.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not going to play together, do you still hold the same enthusiasm for the game? But early on, I bet that really nurtured your development, just being around friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, that was a big part of the reason why I ended up playing, and I kept playing, as you said, was that social aspect. And another reason why when I became a pro, you have parents who come up to you and their kids are like 9, 10 years old, and they're like, what did you do? What can I do? He wants to play pro. And sometimes it's like kind of sad. I understand where they're coming from. They want the best. They want to make their kids' dreams come true, but like the kid has to love playing. And if you're pushing him to be a pro at 8 or 9. I don't know. They do it in some countries and leagues and stuff like that, but that love has to come first. And if it isn't there, then what's the point? Why are you kind of doing it? So yeah, for me, it was all about the love of the game and the interaction and just being able to be free on the field.
So you're coming out of high school, and your club program. There are several colleges, here in the state, 3D1s, but you go to Vegas. You're recruited by another very famous coach, Barry Bartow, who'd been there a long time at that point. So tell us how you get there and what it's like there the first 2 years, because it's a time of transition when you arrive there too.
Yeah, I got there as a walk-on freshman year, ended up doing well. Obviously, as a walk-on, I didn't have scholarship and, was kind of told going into that situation, if you do well, we'll see what we can do. And I ended up being like the second leading scorer, starting every single game. But just I think the mentality at UNLV, it wasn't as good as it could have been. The program was heading in a bad direction. So even after that first semester, they ended up finding a new coach. So that was kind of difficult for me, especially after the success I had my freshman year. So my freshman year, I played with the guy Rod Dychenko, who he was the leading scorer on the team. Ended up getting drafted by DC United, going to the draft and all that stuff. And so I was the second leading scorer. But right before that, I was a walk-on. So I had no idea that the idea of playing pro when I wasn't even really getting looks from D1 colleges, like scholarship, that didn't really make sense to me. So I wasn't looking at it from that. But, halfway through the season, I'm keeping numbers with this guy, and then he gets drafted and so then my mentality really changed. I was like, oh, well, if he's doing it, I got another 3 years before I'm a senior. I can do it too. And so I think that only ramped up kind of my mentality of now this is like a reality and a priority. So there were some times when Rod was out training and I would be there with him as a freshman. He's a senior going to the league, and I'd be there with him when I probably should have been at class or studying. But I had in my mind that, this is something that is attainable for me. And I think just through that my entire career up to that point in soccer had been, all right, there's a failure, there's a tough time, but I'm going to find a way through it. And so even with I had teachers the chances of you going pro are 1%. Mm-hmm. But I thought, just with my mentality, was well, I'm going to give it as best as I can, no matter what, because this is what I want. So, yeah, it was a up and down kind of senior year to college to sophomore year. There's a lot of ups and downs in that area.
How did it go? You must have, I believe you got spotted at a combine, or correct me if I'm wrong, but so there must have been a progression, and you must have continued that ascent your final 3 years at UNLV, right? You could sense your improvement. Did you get opportunities outside of college during that time?
So. I mean, I ended up playing in Des Moines, Iowa, for PDL. So in the summers, instead of going home for 2 summers, my sophomore and junior summer, I ended up going to Des Moines and playing, just because obviously I was pretty set in my ways that I was going to be playing year-round anyway as a pro. And throughout my college career, I got more and more accolades as the years went on. My senior year, I got the most votes out of everybody in the conference from the coaches on the other teams. Ended up doing really well, but I still wasn't invited to the combines, the MLS combines. If I'm correct, nobody from our conference was. So I was playing for a kind of a mediocre college team in a mediocre league, and so it wasn't really looked at. So there weren't that many opportunities. I did go to a few like combines. I went to Chivas combine. I remember I went to Kansas City once when I was in Iowa. I ended up staying with Roger Espinoza and Chance Myers. They let me stay on their couch. A college kid. They let me stay with them and ride to practice with them for like a week. So I was able to get a couple trainings in and stuff like that, but nothing that stuck. Obviously, Chivas didn't work out. Kansas City, they were at the bottom of the league when I was. They were at the bottom of the league when I was there, so they weren't really looking for any new talent. They were trying to figure out their own stuff.
Didn't the Sounders have a combine in Vegas that first year or first 2 years?
So not while I was there.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't able to go to that. I think that might have been the second year. Because I know they held it down there eventually, but I wasn't a part of it. I met up with the Sounders. When I would go back for winter break, I would train with them. Darren Sawatsky was an assistant coach under Brian Schmetzer for them. So when I came back, I would train with them. So Taylor Graham, Roger, those guys, Kevin Sakuda, Zach Scott, like I got to meet those guys and train with those guys. I was actually there while Sebastien Letou was on trial. I remember seeing a group of 3 French guys, didn't speak too much English, training. And then later on, I remember seeing, because he ended up scoring all the goals and they won the championship and he got the golden boot or something like that. And I was like, that was the guy. And he was trying out as like a center back while he was at the Sounders, while I was there. And he was converted. Yeah. So that was funny. And then we ended up playing together later at DC United, which was pretty cool. But there weren't too many combines or anything like that I went to. It just all happened by stance, but I ended up meeting Brian Schmetzer, and I think that's really what obviously led to me meeting up with them in Ventura, California in their first preseason in 2009. That's where I met Ziggy.
Okay. How'd that go? You were probably there with some others that were, I don't know if there were many locals, but you were local. So I would imagine there's a lot of incentive for you to really show your wares.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember seeing an ad with some of my teammates at UNLV, and this is when they announced the team. And I was like, man, it'd be crazy to play for him. I remember like saying that as the commercial was like playing. And then I got a call from, I think Brian Schmetzer asking me to come out to Ventura if I could make it out away from classes. Mm-hmm. And I asked all my professors and they said, absolutely go. So took a friend's car, drove out to Ventura. And yeah, I mean, that was a huge opportunity. It was like the 3rd time that I was getting looked at by MLS coaches. And obviously for my hometown, it was like, this is unreal. And I was a little bit comfortable because some of the guys I knew. So I think that helped out a lot. I knew that they personally, like Brian Schmetzer personally knew me. So that kind of helped, I think, rather than going into a situation where you just, paid for a combine or, got referred to by somebody. So, I went there and then it went well. I don't really remember vividly too much. I remember playing a couple of practice games and doing well, but they had me outside mid, outside back. And I remember Ziggy talking to me and just being like, asking me my situation, what my plans were. And I told him I was, finishing up college and would be done kind of in May. And he said, well, when you get done and you're coming home, then you can come train with us. And I was like, all right, that's cool. Yeah.
So it's those first couple years, 09, 10, it's a tough road. You're being tried out at positions that you hadn't probably played in, if at all, before. You're going to, you'd already gone to Des Moines, and it's Charleston and Finland. And so tell us about that mix of going here, chasing the dream, those years leading up to kind of getting residency back with your hometown club.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ups and downs, and I think just having that resiliency kind of built up as a young kid, getting cut, and then like having that integrity, like that bite to kind of prove myself again and again, I think helped. Otherwise, I would have been out quite quite a bit earlier than I was. I mean, 6 months after signing with the Sounders, I ended up, getting released by them and sent to Charleston. And really remember after I made the team thinking, all right, this isn't like sustainable financially. I'm doing what I love, and it's an amazing club. It was amazing fan base, great teammates. I was actually on the phone with one of the players today, so really good friends. But I was like, it's not really sustainable in the long run. So I'm going to give myself a year of like USL and see kind of what happens, and then kind of reevaluate what I'm doing. And that year was absolutely amazing. That first year at Charleston, we won everything, the championship. I got Golden Boot, a ton of awards, and it really kind of solidified in my mind that I was able to play at the next level. Because the Sounders for that like 6 months pretty much had me at right and left back. And then when I went to Charleston, I got like a kind of number 10 kind of shadow striker role where it was pretty much freedom, go wherever you want, be creative as you want. And that's where I really I thrived. And so I was like, all right, well, hands down, I'm an offensive player. I should be on this side of the 50-yard line. I shouldn't be on the other side. And so I think that was huge for me. And then obviously I had the ability to go back to Charleston just because of how well we did and how well I did when I wanted to play at a higher level. There happened to be a window in between where USL 2 ended. We won the championship and MLS started. So when I was on Charleston, Seattle had released me before. I was playing for Charleston. Seattle picks my rights back up. So I can't talk to any other MLS team. The Charleston head coach let me know. He's like, look, I had trials at like 3 different MLS teams, but you can't talk to any of them. You have to, your rights belong to Seattle. So they got to sell you or bring you back. And so I was like, all right, well, I guess I know where I'll be in come January. But I had a 3-month stint in between. And right after the championship, I get a call from one of my college teammates, and he's in Finland. And they're towards the end of their season, and they're in fear of relegation. And the ownership just wants a forward who has some numbers, and they want American mentality. And he was like, they're willing to offer you this 3-4 month contract. If you do well, they'll see what happens, but they're going to pay for you to come over, play. And so I let Seattle know that that was my plan. They were like, yeah, go for it. Go get experience and play and stay in shape and then come in January. So I was able to go to Finland, lived with my college teammate in his living room in a small Finnish apartment on an island in between Finland and Sweden called Åland Island. Played for IFK Mariam. And I did well. I think I had like 3 or 4 goals, just getting subbed on towards the end of games. We ended up winning the last game to stay in the top league in the Vikas Liga, I believe it's pronounced. My Finnish is non-existent, but the Premier League in Finland, they ended up staying up. So it was an awesome time, great group of guys. I still talk to a few of those guys. So still like just creating relationships and like you said before, like really having fun playing still. And then it was back to the Sounders, and that's when I got, I was a regular sub at the end of games and started scoring goals. And that was, and so that whole stint of 2010 to like 2011 was awesome.
And just a word on that. What's the Finnish winter like?
So because I was in between Sweden and Finland, it wasn't that bad. We were still shoveling snow off the field right before the last game. All the players had to go out with shovels and shovel snow off the fields, but it wasn't as bad as pictures I've seen of Finland. They didn't tell me that when they said that they signed me for 3 months, but it ended up being a good experience. I loved it. I would have, I definitely would have thought about going back. But at the time they were going through a lot of stuff just within their organization, because they almost did get relegated. So ownership was mixing stuff up. So I didn't get the phone call, but yeah, I would have loved to play overseas for a little bit longer.
I remember your first, let's call it full season with the Sounders. I remember specifically the game at RSL. They had that huge win streak. I think it was a league record win or unbeaten streak at home. And I think you came on as a sub. I think, but the shot you hit, it had the same audio as like a dunk, because I think it hit some metal and then it just crashed into the goal. But I mean, it was an emphatic goal, and you hit it with you got all of it. I think it was outside the box or just at the edge. For a first MLS goal, and you being a part-timer, but it's for your club. Tell us about that, and then obviously the hat trick against Columbus, which was I think next to Kufo's, it was one of the first for the club. So kind of a wild finish to that 2011.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that first goal is one that I'll kind of always remember. The only thing that could have made it better was if it was at home. But to beat that record, because they were like, I think like 30 something maybe games of unbeaten, some record at Rio Tinto. That was awesome to break that record with your first goal. But I got to tell you a story about that goal. So the night before, so my wife was living in Salt Lake. So we were just dating at the time. We had started dating in 2010.
Okay.
When I was away, and then I came home, and so she was still in Salt Lake. We were in the hotel room, and it was probably like 10 o'clock at night. We were in the lobby, just chatting, and obviously I was just dating this girl, and was absolutely, floored by her. So didn't want to leave. So it was getting later and later, and we're still in the lobby just talking away, and in comes, and I know I probably knew that I probably should be in my room, even if you're not asleep. Like, you should be in your room away from like women, right? In walks Brian Schmetzer and Tommy Dutra, and they had been at dinner, and they had meals, and were feeling good. And Brian went off because I was out of bed and I was in the lobby and I had a game the next day, and he was not happy at all. And I was just sitting there like quiet while I was getting kind of ripped into. And Tommy's like, no, it's okay. He's in the lobby. He's not drinking. He's not doing anything. And Schmetzer is not letting up. And Tommy's like kind of pushing him into the elevator, like, it'll be all right. And after he's got in the elevator, I just like put my hands in my head. I was like, oh my gosh. I'm barely on the team. I'm like getting a few minutes here and there, but I've been cut before. I was like, oh no. And then I ended up getting subbed on the next day in like I think it was early. I think it was like 16th minute or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up scoring the goal towards the end. We win the game. I remember Brian Schmetzer coming up after the game in the locker room to me. He was like, you're so lucky you scored that goal. He was like, I was going to rip into you so much more. Like, usually I'd go into a game with like maybe 10 minutes left. And so, if I was sitting in a hotel, kind of late, then not big, but I played a lot. And he was like, if you hadn't have done something big, you would have been in a lot of trouble. So that was pretty funny. And it's funny to like think back on it, because now I look back and I realize, because at the time I was like, man, this guy's going crazy. What is going on? But now I see like he was rooting for me. Like it wasn't out of like malice or anything like that. He was like, he kind of brought me in. He's like, I'm over here rooting for you and like, backing you, and you're not doing the right thing. So yeah, a funny one from Brian Schmetzer, but that was awesome. The Columbus game was one I always remember. Ended up getting a hat trick. just that last goal that I scored was similar to the one at Salt Lake, corner of the box, hit it far post high. That one hit the crossbar as well, went down and then came back out of the goal. But yeah, I mean, and for a kid that, like, I had 2 goals before that, and that put me at 5. And in the MLS, 2 and 5, that's a very big difference, especially for a guy not getting that much time. So that's really that game really solidified my place in kind of MLS.
Yeah, it was a sunny day, as I recall, a very sunny day
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's it looked like there was an opening that you'd have this bigger role in 2012 in Seattle, and instead you're essentially swapped for the rights to Eddie Johnson. It has to be a tough pill, but at this point, I think you've swallowed a bunch of pills, figuratively. But I mean, that has to be kind of a tough one.
Yeah.
To go to Montreal.
No, I mean, yeah, that definitely hurt. I think I was in the mindset of like, I had proved myself. I was going to be, productive in the MLS. And even if it wasn't with Seattle, like, I was going somewhere where they really wanted me. Like Jesse Marsh, I remember talking with them after, and like, they wanted, and they were adamant to get me. And even Seattle said that they were like, look, we didn't want to let you go, but this was kind of the only way it was going to happen. So that's somewhere you want to be. I mean, regardless if you're leaving your hometown, you want to be somewhere where you're wanted. Unfortunately, it didn't really turn out the way kind of we had thought it was. Just playing time wise and the way the organization was run, it really wasn't conducive to my style of play, which was unfortunate. And obviously Jesse Marsh didn't stay long, so it wasn't conducive with his coaching. So there were different mentalities there, but still, it was a difficult year, kind of all around, just being out of the U.S., kind of on my own. I was living very far away from everybody else. It was just, there was a lot of stuff going on, which ended up being a negative year. I still ended up getting a few goals, having some time playing on the field. I ended up scoring against Seattle, which Brian,
we remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, Brian gave me oh yeah, you celebrated. I was like, it wasn't anything against you guys. It was more of like relief that I finally got a goal. I've been, I had 5 the year before and was barely getting any playing time. So yeah, that was funny, but ended up just trying to get out of Montreal because obviously it wasn't working. They were reluctant to let me go just because of my mentality. In training, I was still the same player. I was still going to prove myself and work hard every single day. So they appreciated that. And then since they appreciated that, they recognized that they allowed me to kind of go where I wanted to go. And obviously I wanted to get back to Seattle. So, and Seattle never wanted to let me go in the first place. So that's what spurred that kind of movement back. And I think they traded me for like an international slot, which was perfect for Montreal because that's what they were going after. And so, yeah, ended up back at Seattle for the second time.
Each time you leave or leave, leave was not always what you wanted to do, but did you ever think like, well, was that my time with my hometown club, and then you'd get back and then you'd go again? But what it had to be kind of an emotional roller coaster, but or maybe at some point you say, this is a business, and if it happens to be my hometown club, so be it. But what is going through your mind in those moves?
I think after 2011, just in being in the USL and seeing what happens to like young guys, I understood probably better than a lot of guys that it's a business, that it's nothing personal, or at least for me. Like, I was a guy that was going to work hard, put my head down and work hard. So nobody was going to like hate me. and like trade me because I was a bad influence. So for me, it was all business, and I treated it as that, like that, the same as them, but I couldn't really hold it against them when it went against what I wanted to do. So it's funny, like the first time I was let go was the Sounders were letting me go. The second time was because Montreal really wanted me, so like I was kind of taken. And then the third time, after my long stint with the Sounders, really successful, it was my choice to leave. So it was different every single time. And I didn't think I was going to come back, especially after the one that I like was like, I got to get out of here. I didn't think I would be back. I actually wanted to, I thought I was going to end my career in Charleston because I loved living in that place. And it was just like a cool league. I was like, oh, I'll go play there when I'm, you know, in my mid-30s, which is what I am right now. So in an alternate universe, I'm playing for Charleston right now. No, anyway, yeah, it was different every single time. I was happy that I was able to end it with the Seattle Sounders and under Brian Schmetzer, who got it started really in the first place. So that was an awesome experience.
So 20, you're there in 2014, and I know that there was a MLS Cup in 2016, but 2014 was for a season's worth of highlights and memories. And so, I mean, it was a really magical season. You're part of it. You're part of this attack with Oba and Clint, and the goals just seem to come in bunches. I'm curious. I'd really like to know your experience playing with them. Was it surreal? Or did it turn from surreal to, you know, real, or, you know, just this dynamic that was going between all three of you? Really, I know they got the headlines, but I mean, you had a pretty good year. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, 2014, I mean, some of the most fun soccer I've ever been a part of. Obviously, one of the most successful years I had. Being able to play with Clint and Oba was really just a privilege. Honestly, like watching them in practice, because they would always get put on the same team for a good reason. I mean, they're building a connection, right? And that's why you saw it on the field was they were always on the same team. And some of the stuff they pulled off in games was amazing, but some of the stuff they pulled off in practice was like past that, like phenomenal. But for me, it was more about, okay, these guys are two of like the top players in the league, like number one and number two, depending on the day. One is above the other one. What can I do, like, you know, to kind of be a part of this, and what can I do to help them like be as successful as they can? Because if they're on, then it's a wrap. We're going to win this game. And so for me, it was, I remember I would look at the numbers of how much I was like running and how much ground I was covering after every single game, because I knew I needed to, one of the ways I was going to stay on the field was to be the hardest working guy out there. Mm-hmm. And I think even from a younger age, I was never the most technical. I was never like the number 10. So I was always trying to make sure that we would get the ball to those guys immediately and then just go, because they were going to create. And so that was my mentality. I was going to run back and play defense for them. I was going to look for them and just get them the ball and make runs every single time. And really, it was a simple game plan for me. It was difficult because putting that much work on your body is a lot, but I think it was worth it, and it was an amazing time. And yeah, I'm still in awe of those guys, and we see the highlights all the time of those two, and it's awesome.
I mean, I think if you saw double assists and so on, you would see all three of your names. And so, I mean, I think they looked for you when you were up there, and obviously you were told to look for them. But what an amazing experience to be part of that pairing, as a compliment to that pairing. I mean, I just thought you did a very unsung but outstanding job that season with them.
Yeah, Yeah, and I think that was, I mean, and I knew that that was going to be my role, right? I was going to be the one making the runs, and they were looking for me because they knew I'd be the one, trying to run past the line or doing the dummy run to the near post, all the like dirty work. That was my job, and I mean, I was happy to do it because I was reaping the benefits too. I was getting a lot of goals, more goals than I would have without them. So it was definitely complimentary.
I can't remember if it started during that year, but there was the whispers of your Irish heritage coming into play, and you might get a look with Ireland. How close did that ever come to fruition?
I mean, I'm not sure of the specifics. I heard, Klinsman was asking about me to come into January camp. I've heard stuff from some people, but never really spoken to anybody specifically about it. I never got contacted for like national team stuff. I saw articles about Ireland when my kind of heritage and my dual citizenship was put out there. But I never got any phone calls. I would have jumped at the chance, just the opportunity to play in an international game. And honestly, if Ireland would have, called me up and the U.S. wasn't, then like I probably would have taken the opportunity to at least go into a camp with Ireland and maybe force the U.S.'s hand. So, yeah.
Okay. Humanitarian of the year. Each club has one, and then it goes. But with the Sounders, it's a fairly active club in the community to begin with, and you've lived here, you've got relationships. What were some of your interests? What did you like to get involved with? What were the projects that you sought out when you were active in the community with Seattle?
Yeah, for that, I really have to thank James Riley. So in the first year when I came on, he really kind of took me under his wing, and he was doing so much in the community, kind of that I grew up in. I was like, if this guy's doing it, he's not even from here. I got to do something. So I ended up doing a lot with Boys and Girls Clubs, really after school programs, the stuff that I was involved in when I was younger. So there was Boys and Girls Clubs, King County, kind of all over the place, Federal Way, Skyway. And then there was a organization, well, there still is, called Seattle Scores. And I ended up being on the board of that, anything that had to do with kids. So then the club knew that I was trying to do, I would kind of do absolutely everything. So they gave me a bunch of appearances just at random places. So I was doing like 2 to 3 appearances a week, probably in 2011. That year, and it was all over the place, and I absolutely loved it. One of the reasons I started my foundation, just to start to give back to after school programs, so Boys and Girls Club, United Way, Seattle Scores, and still have connections with those organizations today. So yeah, I was pretty much leaning towards stuff that I was involved in when I was a youth.
So who you talk about James and as an influence, or I guess that's how you characterize that, but influencing you on and off the field, who were those people that along the way steered you or inspired you?
Yeah, I mean, at different stages, it was different people. So I could list, a ton of people that I was taking advice and just getting guidance from. I think me and James were definitely connected in that. Like, we were hard workers, so we were the last 2 on the field kind of every single day, doing small drills afterwards. Zach Scott was there as well. So those guys definitely just in the mentality, kind of on the field. Off the field, again, James, he was the one doing stuff outside of soccer and just in the community. But then, I mean, there are people who I went to for advice all the time. Darren Sawatsky, somebody I still talk to for advice. I mean, I looked Roger Levesque, Taylor Graham, all those local kind of legend guys, that were around from the beginning. I really valued their opinions. I mean, even when I was transitioning out of sports, I talked with Zach Scott, I talked with Roger, I talked with Taylor Graham. So guys that I still, look up to, and yeah.
When you were starting, you're married, you and Natalie were married, what year?
2014.
Okay. And then you have moves. I can't remember when kids start coming into the picture, but your job moves 3 time zones away. All of a sudden, it's not just you. But I'm just kind of curious. How does that work for a family, especially a young couple and then a young family?
Yeah, so I ended up getting traded to DC, and right when we found out that we were going to be moving across the country, we found out she was pregnant. So that changed things quite a bit. She was originally going to get a job in DC, but she's a registered nurse. She was administering chemo. Didn't kind of want to be in the hospital while she was pregnant, just around, that stuff. So ended up just staying at home, and I think that was very difficult for her. She's a very hard worker, and so she went from working every single day, working hard, making her own money, to pregnant in a foreign place without any family around, and pregnant at a difficult time. So that was difficult for her, but she was a trooper. She was backing me throughout the DC days. And I had a very good first year, still frustrating, but very good. But I think it was a difficult time just being away from family when the plan was to be with family, especially while she was pregnant and having our first kid.
When you come back again after that, but when it's time to wrap it up, I can't believe it's been a few years now. What you talked about, talking to other ex-players or ex-teammates about what the transition looks like, but what were you weighing, in addition to going back to Charleston, apparently, when that happened? Because I know you end up with the Stars for a little bit, but
Yeah.
that's kind of moonlighting. I realize that, but just tell me all the thought process and how you worked it out.
Yeah, Charleston wasn't really an option for my wife, so the minimum pay isn't quite what we would have liked heading back there. So that was a moot point. Yeah, no, I mean, it's always difficult. I think I got to the point where I didn't want to be moving my family around. We had 2 kids at the time. We were back in Seattle with family. We were in a good place, just kind of outside of soccer, in a very good spot. And I was heading towards the end of my career. I didn't want to jump from team to team, how I had been doing, at the beginning of my career, where you're moving every single year, or jumping down to USL, where the movement of teams is quite a bit more, honestly. If, the roster changes a lot on those teams, and the pay isn't as high, the average pay isn't as high. So I figured it was time, and financially we were good. We've made good investments, so I was going to be okay in that area. And I still wasn't sure what I was going to do, and I ended up just coaching in the meantime. I was finishing my degree, and so it was a tough time. I was happy with my decision, but it still doesn't make it an easy one, and it doesn't make it an easy transition. So I talked with a ton of people about their transitions, people in all different types of sports, in all different walks, people that were just out of sports, people that have been out of sports for 30 years. I ended up getting to talk to Detlef Schrempf, one of my favorite Sonics players, who's still in the area, just about his transition. And it's funny, that was one of the first people that I talked to about it. And then come full circle a few years later, I'm actually in the same profession that he's in right now, even though that's not the kind of route I took. But anyway, yeah, I was just trying to find a role that I could do where I was checking off the boxes of being able to help people, having a schedule that I could kind of, that was fluid because I have young kids, so I can kind of work as hard as I want, or as little kind of as I want. At least after a few years, I'll be able to do that. But there was just a few things, and then finding something that the soft skills that you learn as a professional athlete and those characteristics that you have kind of complement your job. And so I started out looking for something in sales, something along those lines where I could be client facing, I could help people, I could, maybe possibly give them a product or consult. So I started talking to consulting firms, and nothing really quite fit. And then Black Lives Matter happened. This is the story of how I got to this profession, by the way. I'm probably skipping a few things, but Black Lives Matter kind of happened, and started, thinking about inequality and financial literacy is a big part of that. And so that kind of led me into the finance industry. And I had a few friends who've been in it since college. One of my best friends from UNLV has been a financial advisor for 10 years. So talked to him a little bit. And then, I ended up landing at Morgan Stanley at a branch in Federal Way, actually, through a connection that I had with from the Boys and Girls Club from helping out. Me and the financial advisor had helped put together the funding for the small field at the Federal Way Boys and Girls Club right next to St. Vincent, which is a church that me and that financial advisor actually both attended. So there was a lot of connections there. Ended up obviously coming back to Federal Way, which seems to be a theme for me. And yeah, it's been, I've been in the role for about 6-7 months now, and it's been good. But I know there was some stuff you wanted to touch before that. I just jumped ahead.
No, that's fine. I know you. I don't know if you plan to play for the Stars some more, but you got that opportunity. So we got an opportunity to kind of see you, and you still had it. I don't know if you played much indoor. Had you played much indoor other than training?
No, as a kid, we did a couple tournaments, but I'm going to tell you, playing indoor was probably like the most tactically I had to think about soccer. That just didn't come natural. I mean, it's a very different sport. It's a different kind of fitness that you have to have for indoor, and the tactics are very different, but they're small-sided, so you can connect the dots. It's just, it takes a little while. It takes a season or two, really, they say, to really come into it. But it was an awesome experience. And to play for Tacoma, which has an amazing history, Lane Smith, the owner, is a great guy. And then to play with a bunch of local guys that I have connections with through soccer was really cool. So still rooting those guys on. They played tonight. They won in Tampa. I wasn't able to watch it, but yeah, I don't think I plan on playing again. I got to stay in shape somehow. So maybe some over 30 leagues I'll be featured in here pretty soon. But yeah, I don't think I plan on playing again. Not with the career that I have.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of connecting, I know you were talking about connecting the dots on a little field, but I see all these relationships you built, the time and again persevering. I would imagine you have some perspective to leave with people, because more people, it's about setbacks. It's about how we deal with them. And I'm just kind of curious what you would like to leave people with, any words of wisdom on that count.
Yeah, I think two things that I'd like to touch is that failure, that you were talking about, and also kind of regret. I think throughout my career, obviously, met with failure. I mean, there's a ton of talks on it that you gotta love failure, just because fighting through it and then actually hearing yes or actually succeeding, how much more it takes, how much more it means once you do succeed. I think for me, those failures at the beginning really characterized kind of my entire path. So then even later, I probably wouldn't have been able to have the career that I had I not failed when I was in club, when I was in college. I wouldn't have had the grit to kind of stay with it through the USL2, sorry, Charleston was USL2. I had to go down 2 leagues and getting cut and constantly just wondering if you're good enough. If you're changing teams every single year, there's a battle in your head that's saying, man, am I cut out for this? But just being able to fight that and win that battle is an empowering thing. And once you do it once, then you can do it again. If you hear no once and you beat it and you hear the yes or you succeed, then the next time when you hear no, you're not going to think too much of it. I think there's a fear in us hearing no. And I think the fear should more lie in regret. So I would rather me try something 100 times, try a new career that I really enjoy or really want to do 100 times and just fail it, than fail it once and then give up. And then, you're sitting at the end of your life and you have big regrets. I think that's what you should fear, not hearing no, but the regret at the end of your life. So, I think that's kind of what I'd say, and what I have said to younger kids who've been cut or had difficulties or they're not making the academy teams. There's a lot of different paths to where you want to go, and that doesn't just have to be in sports either. There's an easy connection when it comes to sports because you can kind of see it, but it's in all paths and walks of life.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing time with us today, but I think of you as just a shining example of persistence and success, and hometown boy makes good. Just so many things wrapped up in Lamar Neagle, and so I'm just thankful that we got a chance to see you here, that we got a chance to share some time here today. So thanks, Lamar. I really appreciate it, and we appreciate it too.
No, thank you for having me on. Anytime, Frank. Appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks to our producer, Leanne Johnson, and thanks to all of you for watching our Conversations with a Legend series. For more on the history of Washington State soccer and to learn more about Washington State Legends of Soccer, go to wasoccerlegends.org. We appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time.